Welcome to another episode of the Garvescope Show. Hold on, we got TikTok on an angle. Hello, TikTok. Hello, YouTube. Hello, Instagram. Hello, I don't know. There are like 15 places where this show streams. We're going to have the same technical problems that we have every single time because, of course, there's going to be drilling going on in the background. And I'm your host, Technical Problems Guaranteed. This is a bonus episode this week because there was so much news. I took a couple of week break, and there was so much movie news, film industry news, Hollywood news, Bollywood news, that I just couldn't tackle it all on Tuesday. So we're back for a bonus Thursday episode. If you like it, maybe we'll make this a habit and just go live two days a week. We'll see. But that being said, welcome to the Garvescope Show. This is the agenda that we have for those of you who are on a streaming platform where I can actually share an agenda. We're going to do Room Tone. We got a ton of great news stories around the industry. We're going to talk about Will Smith's new album and whether or not we forgive him. We're going to talk about what's above the line. The target this time is who has the most power in the film industry as far as film festivals go. In Waves this week, we're going to talk about April Fool's Day and David Fincher. Yes, those two meet this time. Film School Dropout, we're going to be talking about how Greenlit doesn't actually mean that your movie is getting made for Cam A or Cam B. We're going to talk about theatrical release versus digital first releases, the pros and cons of each. We'll do our game of real or real, where we compare an AI movie to a real obscure movie and try to figure out which one is fake. For taking on the hot take, I am taking on the take of, which one are we doing? Hold on. TikTok. Wait, no. What? Oh, I didn't update it. See, I told you, technical problems are guaranteed. Oh, you know what? We're talking about promoting your content on social media. Lights Camera lawsuit. We're talking about one called Buchwald versus Paramount Pictures. Yes, Paramount Pictures keeps popping up in this legal segment. I'm the only person who can make legal stories not boring, but do it and not be a lawyer. Right? Maybe not. Then we're going to wrap things up with another episode of Following Stephen Follows, where we're talking about whether or not statistically, this is by data, video games made into movies are the worst. So that's it. That's what we're doing today on the Garvescope Show. Thanks for tuning in. Let's get things going. Lights, camera, Garvescope. All right. So, you heard the big intro, and you've seen a couple of these episodes before. The first thing that we do on the Garvescope Show is we talk through industry news. And how can we talk about the film and TV industry and not talk about this story about White Lotus star Amy Lou Wood and her portrayal on SNL, was it last week? I guess it was last week. Backstory on this. Amy Lou Wood played, honestly, one of my probably favorite characters in this latest season of White Lotus. And I won't, for those who haven't watched it and want to watch it, this will not ruin or spoil White Lotus at all. I will say that she burst onto the scene and very quickly became my favorite actor on the show, my favorite character on the show, and Amy Lou Wood is going to have an incredible career. Her and I have something in common. I don't know if you can see it. We don't have the best teeth. And in SNL last week, which I will spoil, they did a really generally fantastic sketch called White Lotus, where they were adapting the White Lotus season into a world where Donald Trump was one of the main characters. Not going to get political, but I will say that I had a good laugh. I felt like there was a balance and people were equally badly portrayed. Not equally badly portrayed. I think that it did what good comedy does, and it portrayed everyone equally. Satire isn't satire if it doesn't look at everything, and you cannot laugh at one thing and then when they make fun of you say, well, that's not funny. And so I have a real moral conundrum here in front of me because they made fun of Amy Lou Woods' teeth. Not just, she's aware that she has a gap in her teeth. I'm aware that I have a gap in my teeth. But the question was more around, she made the woman who played her, who portrayed her in this, Sarah Sherman, who does body horror comedy. That's like her specialty. Made a comment about like, what's fluoride? And there's what Amy Lou Wood says, and this was, I believe, in a tweet or a blue sky. She says, I have a gap in my teeth. I don't have gross teeth. There's a difference. She also talks about like, I'm thick-skinned. I find these things funny. I'm not calling it out, but if I had to be honest, I would say that it was a little bit mean and unfunny. And then she signed it XO. So like, I think she's in good humor about it. And again, I think she's going to have a great career. I think that it wasn't the best writing that SNL has ever had. I think the rest of the episode was pretty fantastic. John Hamm played Robert F. Kennedy Jr. I thought it was funny. I understand being hesitant about the comedy, and it is not fair to say that the result of Amy Lou Woods' teeth are the result of not knowing what fluoride is. I think everyone's entitled to their opinion on this. As somebody who has terrible teeth and takes care of them, I will say I think I would have rolled with it, but you don't know until you're in that scenario. But how can you not talk about that first? Because that's kind of been the big deal this week. The next story that we got is from Screen Rant. It was kind of a breakdown of Amazon and MGM Studios, now that they're the same company that Amazon owns MGM. The gambles that they're taking, the gambles they're not taking, and whether or not it's the right time for this. Actually, one of the things that stood out to me almost immediately, and I pulled data up to back it, is, Amazon had said that they had a $1 billion a year commitment to generating new content. $1 billion a year is 10 $100 million movies. Sorry. Yeah. Which is not, it's a lot. It's a lot of money. But let me show you, because Amazon is a publicly traded company, and a lot of these streaming platforms, or the owners of these streaming platforms, are publicly traded companies. I am able to actually pull what these platforms spend on content acquisition every year, because they report it. So Disney spent $35.8 billion, Comcast, NBC, Universal, which owns Peacock, Zumo, Hayu, $24.5 billion. Amazon, and I believe this is 2023's number, spent $21.5 billion acquiring film and TV projects for their streaming platform in last year or the year before. So $1 billion committed to new projects isn't like like wildly large numbers. I wanted to flag that. But the story goes into all the things that Amazon MGM is doing. One of them is that even though they own one of the largest streaming platforms on earth, they are leaning into theatrical work. They both feel they have financial and philosophical devotion to movie theaters. They said that to Deadline. They have 16 films slated for 2027. 16 films, that's a pretty big commitment. So it seems like the acquisition of MGM by Amazon doesn't necessarily translate to their intention to separate themselves only into streaming. It seems like they are still going to be dedicated to those going into movie theaters. The story talks a little bit about Apple. Apple has reportedly scaled back their theatrical output, which to me that's a little bit laughable. Apple has not really done that much as far as getting films that their studio develops into theaters. This mentions Killers of the Flower Moon and Argyle. I would think Greyhound. They don't produce enough films to really have an impact on that anyway. So like scale back, whatever. You're spending hundreds of millions of dollars on films. And Apple is, at least until tariffs, was the company that could afford to lose money on their streaming platform. And that just seemed kind of what they were doing. There's a quote here: Amazon is well positioned to consistently deliver exclusive films to Prime Video. Yeah, no shit, Sherlock. But they mentioned, that they are now the owners of a lot of really good IP, specifically James Bond. I don't know if you have seen the story, but the Broccoli family has signed over control of the James Bond franchise over to Amazon, which means that Amazon is now in charge of that. They also own Project Hail Mary, the second book to film adaptation from Andy Weir, based on a book of the same name, which is starring Ryan Gosling and is one book after The Martian, which starred Matt Damon. Mentions Chris Hemsworth and Mark Ruffalo's new heist movie, Crime 101, which doesn't have a release date, but that pretty quickly Amazon has turned itself into one of the major studios, and the fears that people had about whether or not that meant that there would be less theatrical releases doesn't necessarily seem to be coming true. So that's good news, but hey, let's continue to watch this with tepid expectations because you never know. This story from The Hollywood Reporter on the creator of Black Mirror, Charlie Brooker, was pretty interesting. It talks about him as a person and how he sees the world and the lens he sees the world through. This is at the time where the new season of Black Mirror is coming out. People are saying that this is probably one of the best seasons, if not the best season to be released. And there were a couple of things that I thought were really interesting in here. Specifically, I highlighted this one because I think it's hyper relevant to filmmakers. So this is in an interview format. So this is a Q&A. The interviewer says, when you've described your 20s, you have to read this, right? This picture of a guy smoking 60 cigarettes a day and tilting his head on, tilting his TV on its side so he could more easily watch it while lying in bed. Not gonna lie, I've done that with my laptop. These are not. And then he finishes the sentence for him. Hallmarks of a winner. I was going to say that the traits of somebody as prolific as you've been in the last 25 years. What's changed? I think this is really interesting. Motivation is usually the biggest blocker behind indie filmmakers and actually making films. And Brooker goes on to say, you would call me a slacker in my 20s, a bit directionless. I always wished I was writing TV comedy, but I didn't know how to get into it. I didn't go to Oxford or Cambridge. I didn't know people. And I was stoned a lot of the time, working in a video game shop and drawing comic strips. Somebody said, if you do a small thing and stick to it, people may catch on. So I started this parody of the Radio Times, our TV guide in the UK, and it just took off. That was the one thing that changed my career. I kept getting offered gigs. So, take that as a lesson learned. If you do even just a little bit of progress towards your goal every day, it can result in a career in the industry that you want to work in. There was another thing that I wanted to talk about because the article starts very strong. And I'm just going to read this because, no, I won't read it. I'll summarize it. So, there's a comment about how there's a new rideshare app available now called Protector. It's a car service with armed guards for executives and others that were rattled by the December shooting of United Healthcare CEO Brian Thompson. So you effectively use an app to order a ride, and the ride shows up and includes armed guards. To which Charlie Brooker, this legend who has this tendency to look at the world in a dystopian way, says, Jesus, okay, that's dystopian. But surely it's a perfect service for someone who, wants to assassinate somebody. Just sign up to work as a guard, and then you're in a car with a gun and somebody important. Yeah. Somebody didn't ask that question when they were designing an app like that? Interesting. Not hyper Hollywood related, but it was a fun read. Okay, so let's talk about that little thing that happened, CinemaCon 2025. Deadline had an article, what worked and what didn't. There's a ton to be taken away from this. We talked about it a little bit on Tuesday, but generally it just seems like the industry still feels that theatrical can work. It mentions a bunch of these bigger films that are coming out: Avatar, Fire and Water, Superman, Jurassic World Rebirth, Ballerina, which is a spin-off of the John Wick universe. There's the Lilo and Stitch live action. There's this supposedly last Mission Impossible film, Mission Impossible Final Reckoning, that are all coming out this year, along with, the performance of the Minecraft movie. That the sentiment is good. Nobody knows if there's any possibility that this is going to return to the 11.9 billion in gross that we had in 2018, but that this is a pretty strong slate this year, and it seems like studios are not shying away from it. I did like that it flagged that Sony doesn't really have a gigantic thing in its slate, but it did confirm that Sam Mendes is doing the Beatles, and who the cast is for this Beatles film. But then it turns out it's not a film, it's 4 films. It will be 4 separate biopics that come out in April 2028. So probably weekly, you would assume, in April 2028. Telling the story of the Beatles across 4 different characters in 4 different films. That's commitment. They talk about one of the red flags that they would look for if people weren't feeling bullish about the future of cinema and theaters and theatrical releases, and that would be if people weren't paying significant money to get stars to show up to CinemaCon. And it said, look, if that was the case, Tom Cruise, Scarlett Johansson, Jenna Ortega, Leonardo DiCaprio, Ana de Armas, Glenn Powell, Chris Pratt, Ariana Grande, Cynthia Erivo, Zoe Saldana, and more wouldn't have attended because it takes a lot of money and resources to get talent like that to appear. Talked about Project Hail Mary, Amazon MGM, and it does mention that Amazon MGM is effectively now a sixth studio alongside the original large five that has a significant slate, so that we're actually looking at probably 15 net new large films being released per year because there's another studio doing it. At the same time, it comes at the cost of 20th Century Fox being acquired by Disney, so then Disney kind of consolidates and is probably going to have a smaller slate, but generally the vibe and the energy was good, and I think that that's what we all want to hear. Sam Mendes's The Beatles movies, all four of them are coming out in April 2028. So I hope you really like The Beatles, because in April 2028 you're getting 4 Beatles films in 1 month. Woo! And who knows? What if this is going to be one of those things where you get like Jobs and Steve Jobs came out the same year? What if we have other biopics at the same time? Who knows? Another cool announcement, if you are a film nerd, is that the Stanley Kubrick estate is actually on board an upcoming documentary. They're providing a lot of their archive that is going to tell the story of the creation of 2001: A Space Odyssey. It's being produced by a couple of big names, including Leonardo DiCaprio, but just the fact that that Kubrick's estate is on board means that we're probably going to get some snapshots into the production that we may not have already seen, and that could be a very exciting thing. And speaking of exciting things, there's my suave transition. Let's talk about the Minecraft movie, because it is a massive hit, and it is what a lot of people are saying was an unexpected massive hit. And I kind of want to push back on that. Look, 3 weeks ago, we talked about the Snow White movie and how everyone should have seen that flop coming. I think the Minecraft movie is something that we should have seen coming on the blockbuster side of things. You have a gaming industry that is larger than the film industry. You have the number one game short of Roblox that's played by everybody who plays video games, or has been played by everybody who plays video games, with bugs and culture and community behind it. And it's coming out in a film. Of course it's going to go do good. You don't think that the Mario Brothers movie became the $1.5 billion hit just because it was a shock? Do you think it was Chris Pratt that did that? I don't think it was Chris Pratt. Fantastic performance so far from a Minecraft movie. I was actually just watching a video. If you watch Hank and John's YouTube channel, Hank has a spin-off channel called, I think it's just called Hank's Channel. And he was talking about the experience that he had going to a theater, and that it was like the right level of rowdiness, and it felt good because it felt like people had come together to experience something together, and that he hadn't felt that since like the 2000s Star Wars releases, where everyone was there for a purpose because they didn't know each other, but they had a shared love for something, and that it was in some ways Rocky Horror Picture Show-esque. And that makes me think of like The Room. And if you go see a screening of The Room and people are throwing spoons and they're screaming water and they're throwing popcorn, like that is an experience. And that is an experience that develops because of community. And we should have seen that the community behind Minecraft is going to love this just as much as everything else, including, having a hit song that people are memorizing before they go so they can sing along with it. There's chicken jousting, and that is just a fantastic experience. This story from The Hollywood Reporter is fantastic because it does also talk about Pamela Abdi and Michael DeLuca who we were just talking about 2 days ago potentially being under fire because of their intention to invest largely in no known IP films, but they do have this IP thing that is exploding, and so it may save them. We'll talk about the president and CEO of Warner Brothers a little bit later, but here are people that are trying to do good work for the most part, and this is a time that may be buying them more time at Warner Brothers if Warner Brothers Discovery doesn't continue to have financial problems, which we will get to. Next story, 5 reasons a Minecraft movie became a record-breaking box office success. I mean, we've kind of touched on these. You have the all audience appeal. So, Jack Black has been attached to some pretty big things. Jumanji, Super Mario Brothers movie, and now Minecraft. And it seems like the things that he's doing have made him kind of an omni success, like omni audience, for comedy, at least. This is actually the real reason why I saved this story. Really stood out to me. If you thought Barbie had a lot of product integrations, for a Minecraft movie, Warner Brothers worked with a whopping 45 brands, including McDonald's, Doritos, and Oreo, to sell all kinds of people on the video game adaptation. So, wow, 45 product placements. You want to talk about co-financing a movie? That's a huge source of revenue opportunity. The story mentions pent-up demand that so far Captain America Brave New World, Snow White, and Mickey 17 and Alto Knights really haven't been juicy to consumers, and that this has kind of been the first juicy, they don't say juicy, I'm saying juicy, film of the season, and that, has made it successful. We'll see how well that translates to the summer tentpoles, which are Marvel's Thunderbolts, DC's Superman, and Tom Cruise's Mission Impossible: The Final Reckoning, and Disney's Lilo and Stitch, which I imagine is probably going to be a massive hit that will not flop like Snow White did. And then, like, the video game boom, it talks about the video game boom. Again, this is like the largest and most played video game on Earth. By people of all ages. I'll add that caveat. It's a little bit different than something like Fortnite, right? This is something that isn't really going to be age restricted, and you have 45-year-olds in their parents' basement playing it just as much as you have 7-year-olds in their parents' basement playing it. And so this is as of April 13th, but box office as of the 13th was $551 million globally, and you can kind of compare that to The Amateur, which I'm really excited about, with Rami Malek at $32 million. Cool. To the website that needs a new font, World of Real is talking about the budget for Mission Impossible: The Final Reckoning. It was a $400 million budget, which means that they are going to lean really heavily into this being the last movie of the series, and will just piss me off if it is not the last movie in the series, because I don't like liars. So $400 million, to put that in context. The last one cost, I have it in here somewhere. I think it was $300 million, and it made about $570. Come on, the numbers are in here. Oh, did I not? Maybe no. It was in here. So this was $400 million to produce. It would need to reach $1 billion worldwide to break even. The highest grossing Mission Impossible film was 2018's Fallout, which grossed $791 million. So we're talking it needs to be $210 million more successful than the most successful film of 2018, the most successful year of box offices on Earth. So it is a huge gamble, and it is very possible that this loses money, which is very interesting and not something you see super often with Tom Cruise. It's a huge gamble. $400 million again, needs to produce over it needs to produce over $1 billion at the box office. This is where I found the stat. So early box office projections tracking for franchise record. This is where I found so $61 million opening. They're expecting it to do big stuff. I mean, they needed to do big stuff. Okay, there we go. So Dead Reckoning made 571 on a budget of 300. So that's kind of an underperformer. Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how this rolls out. I mean, this is a franchise that's been sneaky big since the 90s. It's not James Bond, but it's probably the closest thing to it if you were trying to compare both the IP and the box office draw. Only difference is it hasn't been new stars every couple of films. It has been Tommy Boy Cruise the entire time. This is a nice story. We need nice stories every once in a while. Southern Nevada and private business is investing in the future of indie film production in that state. There is a group that's been led by Howard Hughes Corporation. Do you remember Howard Hughes? He looks like Leonardo DiCaprio. Looked like Leonardo DiCaprio. They are ready to break ground on a new film complex that's going to bring about 4,000 jobs for the construction and 15,000 jobs long-term to Southern Nevada for film production. It says that the jobs will average over $113,000 in salary plus pension and benefits. That's going to be a huge boon for that area. We'll see if tax incentives can continue to drive film productions to that area outside of Las Vegas. But that's a huge investment in something that is not in Hollywood. So it unfortunately and fortunately continues the trend of the business moving out of a state that hasn't necessarily passed tax incentives that do a good job of keeping business in the state. The good news is it's in the United States. It's not international. So hopefully that property gets built and it gets used. Okay, I had to fight the urge to go too hard on tariffs. The one thing that I am going to pull in and talk about is that PBS, the public broadcasting system, along with NPR, are the target of potential cuts from this Doge group that has been built to make cuts. This stands out to me because if you're not aware of the history of news TV broadcasting in the United States, the radio waves that are used by broadcasters to broadcast their TV channels are effectively owned in the United States by the FCC. And the FCC has licensed those, given free access, really, to TV channels to broadcast on. In return, those channels are required to provide 1 hour of unbiased nightly news. Not unbiased, but nightly national news. And so that's where your nightly newscast came from. But the world has diverged from that significantly, and the creation of the 24-hour news cycle through the creation of the 24-hour news network, first CNN, but also MSNBC and Bloomberg and Fox News and Newsmax, and all of them has taken what would be a 1 hour repeat of the news of the day, because that's really as much news as there is that is worth covering at a national level, and tried to fill the other 23 hours of the day with commentary. And so when you remove independent government-funded organizations that are largely unbiased, like PBS and NPR, when you remove their funding, you are removing the pillars that support the last two largely unbiased bastions of quality news coverage in the United States. And that can be problematic, but as with all of this, time will tell. Now we get to talk about Warner Brothers Discovery again. So, the CEO, David Zaslav, has had his pay package increased to $51.9 million. We're going to call it $52 million for now on. Look, this is a pretty embattled individual who is really removing any independent projects, any projects that are developing new IP, and only investing in projects that have existing IP, things that are sequels, things that are based on books, and is now rewarding himself for that work. But at the same time, Warner Brothers Discovery is in financial ruin. After the merger with Discovery, they are just at the verge of bankruptcy. He would point that finger toward developing new IP versus using existing IP. You could argue either way, but I don't think that a company that is at the verge of financial failure should be giving raises to their leadership. That's my personal opinion, but I couldn't not talk about it. All right, let's talk about unions, because happy, joy. The WGA, the Writers Guild of America, is penalizing 6 members for allegedly breaking strike rules during the writers' strike that happened in 2023. There are a couple of different ways to look at this. So just to give you some examples, a couple of the people were, they're basically being accused of writing on projects while the union was on strike, which is bad from the union's perspective, but the union isn't necessarily behaving above board either. They are not allowing appeals in the same way that they normally would. They are being very public in shunning these individuals. There is somebody who was directing on a project, and so the changes that they self-reported to the union that they made were in their capacity as a director and not as a writer. And so it's a very large gray area. The union members have a right to ask that the penalty or the determination of guilt be moved out to the general voting public of the union. And so that vote is scheduled to happen on May 6th. And we'll see how that happens. Mixed in with this is somebody who is... Actually, you know what? Before I get to that. So here's a quote. The board punished me for being transparent, denied my right to due process and a fair trial, and pressured me to name names while refusing to provide protection from legal retaliation. When I withheld, the board branded me a scab. This is not justice, it's coercion. So we'll see how that appeal works out. Within this is a mention of a writer from Last Man Standing. If you're familiar with the political leanings and the behaviors of Tim Allen, it's not wildly surprising to me that he had a Facebook post that the union called racist and offensive and a depiction of a lynching, and so he was censured. So yeah, there's a lot to digest in the story. It's a short story, but keep an eye out for that vote May 6th, because it's going to determine how the rest of the world of this union feels about people who are serving in dual capacities, whether or not your right to edit something as a director that you wrote as a writer is covered by the union. That's kind of a precedent that they are going to need to tackle. All right, that's everything for the news this week. Now we get to do my favorite segment, and I guess I call all of them my favorite segment, What's Above the Line? In What's Above the Line on the Garvescope Show, we tackle a hot topic around the film industry and give it a firm but necessary ranking. This week, we're talking about the 5 film festivals with the most industry power. Oh, I didn't update this. Okay, well, we'll just keep it on that. Okay. And so, look, there are a lot of film festivals that are gigantic around the world, and if you're outside of the film industry, some of them still even carry weight beyond those who know the industry. I mean, South by Southwest is pretty famous. We always hear about Sundance. We always hear about Cannes. In the industry, we think of Toronto, Berlinale, the Berlinale, and Venice. There's Tribeca. These are all big film festivals, but I don't think that their power in the industry is actually at parity. They're a little bit different. So what are the most powerful film festivals? I would say number 5 on the list is probably Cannes, which is based in France. It's probably the most prestigious international platform, especially for like auteur filmmakers and prestige cinema. You're not likely to see huge blockbusters go through this, but it does attract global buyers. It does get films into the market. It does always attract A-list talent and press from just everywhere around the world. And the winners of the Palme d'Or prize, which is Cannes', highest prize, builds careers. And, on that list are like Francis Ford Coppola for Apocalypse Now in 1979. Quentin Tarantino won the award for Pulp Fiction in 1994. And more recently, Bong Joon-ho won it for Parasite in 2019. To me, number 4 on this list of the most powerful film festivals around the world is probably Sundance in the U.S. I put U.S. because at the time that I wrote this, it was like, oh, they're likely going to move. That move has been solidified. They are moving from Park City, Utah to Boulder, Colorado. Sundance is still probably your best shot at launching an American indie film, if you can get your film into it. Major buyers attend. They're actively looking for films that they want to distribute and that would potentially be streaming hits. Films that have been successful there are things like Coda, Child of Deaf Adults, Past Lives, and Fair Play. And so there are definitely a ton of examples of it catapulting directors from obscurity to studio offers and sometimes even Marvel meetings. One of my favorite examples from Sundance would be Robert Rodriguez and Mariachi, which has turned into quite the career. Number 3 on the list of the most powerful film festivals, I would say, is probably Toronto International Film Festival, or TIFF, T-I-F-F. It is perfectly timed right ahead of the awards season. It usually brings in a bunch of A-list premieres, it brings in a bunch of Oscar hopefuls, and has a strong market that works toward negotiating deals between filmmakers and buyers for North American distribution. Their People's Choice Award has been a pretty reliable predictor of Oscar performance. It includes Nomadland, Green Book, and 12 Years a Slave. Then there's Germany, number 2 on the list, Berlinale. It's German. It's spelled Berlinale. Which is in Germany. It's a really kind of one of the most premier major European industry. It has the largest European industry presence and really focuses on films that have rising global focus, and it really focuses on diverse and political cinema. It's a top spot for securing Euro TV and streamer deals. And the co-production market is very serious behind-the-scenes networking goldmine if you're able to make it there. Number 1 is going to have to wait. Let me talk about two festivals that I'm going to actually put below the line, which would make them 6 and 7. First one is South by Southwest. Now, South by Southwest is a huge conference. It's a music conference, it's a digital conference, it's a film conference, film festival. It does a lot, but it's really historically been more tech music party than film festival. Now, they announced this year at the end of their film festival, at the end of their conference in March, that they are going to lean into film and tech a little bit more in coming years, and they're going to shorten the music side, but they are still torn priorities, and they really only bring in incredibly buzz-heavy films, which makes them buzz-heavy and deal light, especially for dramas and international films. It's been great for genre films. Cabin in the Woods is like a great example of a movie that premiered there. But it just very rarely launches big theatrical success stories. But everyone's competing to be in South by Southwest. The other one that I would put probably below the line is Tribeca Film Festival, which is here in New York, in Tribeca. And look, it's, it's been a bastion of dramatic work. It's, held up and championed by Robert De Niro. It's been great for prestige and clout in New York. But distribution deals don't really actively come out of that. It feels like a super well curated series of screenings more so than like a film marketplace where deals can happen. And it doesn't draw the same deep bench of buyers that you would get if you went to Toronto, Sundance, or even Berlin. Okay, let's jump back up to the top, and that is the number one film festival, I think, when it comes to powering independent filmmakers, and that's actually Venice Film Festival, not Venice Beach, Venice in Italy. They are historic, they're glamorous, and they are a powerful early launch pad for awards contenders. They tend to favor auteur-driven and artsy prestige films, so if you're like a true film fan versus a movie fan, it is the place that you want your film to go. There are occasionally splashy studio debuts that happen there, but The Whale, Roma, and Power of the Dog all premiered at Venice. And that's my list, and that has been above the line. Let's talk about what's making waves this week. Just as much as these things making waves this week, I have a gripe. I have a petty gripe with the film industry and with just world culture as a whole. Can we not do April Fool's Day anymore? Because people forget that it's April Fool's Day. Not just the people who are fooled, but the people that actually have real news to release. And so on April 1st this year, I'm sitting there scrolling through news on my phone, and I come across this story. David Fincher producing the sequel to Quentin Tarantino's Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. Is that an April Fool's Day story, or is that a real story? Because if it's a real story, cool. If that's April Fool's, then screw you, man. Not cool. And so, God forbid that you are somebody who has a real news story that comes out on April 1st. I would say if I was going to die, I would like to not die on April 1st, because anybody who cared would not know if they could believe it. Oh, April Fool's, Ben isn't dead. Okay, so let's talk about this. So, for a long time, Quentin Tarantino has been saying that his next project that he directs will be his last. And we've had a title for that project for a long time. We were told that it was called The Critic, and that it would follow a film critic for a porn magazine in the 1960s. We eventually hear that it is going to star somebody he's worked with before, specifically on Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, Brad Pitt. Rumors start to come out that Brad Pitt is reprising his role from Once Upon a Time in Hollywood and that he will be playing Cliff Booth, the stunt double of Leonardo DiCaprio from that film, and that will have some form of a tie-in for this The Critic movie. Then bad news, we start to hear that production for The Critic is falling through some cracks, and then we hear that Tarantino has shelved it. Now we're hearing, and I believe that this is a real story because reporting on it has continued despite it first breaking on April 1st, that David Fincher is going to pick that project up and work on it. Fantastic. I think we all have faith in Fincher's ability to deliver a great story. He's also worked with Brad Pitt before. Maybe that means that this is darker than a typical Tarantino movie, but what does this mean for any future production from Quentin Tarantino? We don't know. But I did, you know what, while I was doing this, while I was kind of writing this up and notes for myself and getting ready for this show, I thought, what a good time to mention one of my favorite things that I love Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. But one of the things that I love almost more than Once Upon a Time in Hollywood itself is the list of people who played minor roles in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood and went on to have incredible years in the last couple of years, right? So you have the main staples: Leonardo DiCaprio, Brad Pitt, Margot Robbie, Emile Hirsch had a cameo, but Margaret Qualley had done work before this, but has gone in to do some great projects since then. You then have, we've all heard of Timothy Olyphant. Austin Butler went on to be Elvis, and was in Dune Part 2 and the Bike Riders. You have, everybody has heard of Dakota Fanning, but she played a pretty minor role. Al Pacino was in it. I don't know if you've heard of Al Pacino. Don't call him Albert. Lena Dunham played a minor character. Mikey Madison. You've heard her name lately because of everything that she's raking in on an award level for Anora. Sydney Sweeney, yeah. Have you heard of Sydney Sweeney? So, look at these people played such small roles. They weren't even, necessarily cameos. But this movie showcased so much talent, and there were so many opportunities and so many people that wanted to be involved that these stars in their own right sign up to play anything in it. And have gone on. I mean, the level of talent for Sydney Sweeney and Austin Butler and Mikey Madison and Margaret Qualley. I love that about the film, and I feel like every time I go back and watch it, I'm like, oh, that person. You know what? I didn't notice they were in this, and now they have this incredible career. Let's talk about Film School Dropout. So step right up. It is another round of Film School Dropout, where we take widely believed industry facts and we dunk on them. This week we're talking about the fact that the term greenlit doesn't actually mean that it's necessarily happening in Hollywood, and why films still die in pre-production. Because in Hollywood, greenlit is kind of short for we like it until we get bored or we get scared. And so, yay, congratulations if your film gets greenlit for funding, but that doesn't mean that the work stops there. Not just because production is ahead of you, but that you are going to have to continue to sell that film to people, including the people who greenlit it, for the rest of its existence. So what does greenlit actually mean? It's officially the go-ahead from a studio or a financier to move forward with development or production for a film. But greenlit is usually a conditional term. It could be subject to budgetary approvals, it could be subject to cast availability, it could be subject to union negotiations and confirmation of and receipt of tax incentives. And at any time in the modern age, changes in streaming algorithms or a new executive, and I like to joke that, the new executive's astrology chart tells us this is not a good film project anymore. Those things can all have an impact on whether or not your film ultimately gets made, even if you're this close to finishing it. So, leadership shakeups, new executives equal new mandates. Greenlit projects often get iced because they weren't yours to champion. Especially, from the perspective of the executive, if it's not their film, if they didn't greenlight it and they're taking over, they have no emotional connection to it. So you have to, as a filmmaker, continue to make the business case for that film project, even if... Oh no, I just realized I was muted on some of these channels this whole time. Well, here we go. You will have to continue to make your business case. Then there's budget bloat, right? If a project gets greenlit for $20 million and the final numbers come in at $35 million, the studio can pull the plug, which just, means that you're going to go back to zero, and you either need to find a way to come up with the rest of that money, or you need to come up with a way to produce it for what it was originally quoted and then renegotiate. When a star drops out, that can be a pretty tragic thing. Films get greenlit because they have specific cast, but scheduling conflicts or cold feet for A-listers or B-listers can really have a bad impact on whether or not that film stays greenlit. Market shifts, they happen. If you are targeting young adults and you're coming off of the tail end of Mockingbird and Twilight, and the world is sick of young adult adaptations, it may be that you are a victim of that and you get cut. And then, financing could fall through at any time, especially for indies where financing in itself is near impossible. You move forward based on expected financing, but if you lose a grant or an equity investor, you're effectively out until you can fundraise again. And that's why we see a lot of films start production and then pause. They go into production hell. I'll give you 3 examples of super prominent films that were greenlit and then fell apart. One of them, Guillermo del Toro was making a film called At the Mountains of Madness. It was greenlit by Universal and Tom Cruise was attached to it, but then was canceled because del Toro refused to make it PG-13. Tim Burton was making Superman Lives with Nicolas Cage as Superman. Kevin Smith was writing. They spent $30 million on development, and then the studio pulled the plug due to creative differences and fears about how the budget was going to swell up. And then David Fincher's Rendezvous with Rama was technically greenlit more than once and never shot, and he still wants to make it, but I don't think we'll ever see it. So look, Greenlight isn't a guarantee in your career, and it's just like everything else in film. You kind of have to roll with the punches, and if you are dedicated to making that project, then you'll continue and you'll find a way to do it, and you'll find people that align with your interests. But it's not a guarantee. So always add flexibility to your plans. Always plan for a plan B if plan A drops out, specifically actors. Always try to come in well below what your projected budget is. Never hope that somebody is just going to extend the budget because they've already spent money on it. And to develop multiple projects in parallel, because Hollywood can cancel your baby, but at least you can have multiple children. I like to always have at least three pots on the stove at a time, be developing 3 projects simultaneously, and they're all in various states of pre-production, production, and post-production. And some move fast, some move slow, some jolt forward and then freeze. But, keep those things moving because it can have a good impact, and it can save your sanity just as much as it can save your career. Let's talk about Cam A or Cam B.
One choice, 2 options, and no takebacks. It's time for Cam A or Cam B.
So every decision in filmmaking changes the final product. So what happens when you have 2 paths to choose from? This is Cam A or Cam B, where we break down 2 filmmaking industry choices and decide which one is a better move. Lights, camera, let's debate. What is the best goal for indie filmmakers? Is it a theatrical release or is it a digital first release? So there are some pros and cons. Let's talk about Cam A, which is a theatrical release as an end goal for your film. Pros are prestige, clout, legacy, your poster on a real theater. It's kind of a bucket list moment for filmmakers. Gives you an opportunity to be reviewed by major outlets like Hollywood Reporter and Variety. It feeds into award season eligibility, Oscars, Indie Spirit Awards, and it gives you potential to build grassroots buzz, especially with regional and specialty runs. Downsides are, though, that they are expensive and they're risky. Marketing costs can easily exceed the cost of your production. It's harder to fill seats unless you've got a star, a hook, or you kind of have a miracle type of idea. Box office splits are pretty brutal, especially because it's so expensive to run a theater. You're keeping maybe 30 to 40%, and that's if you are an indie filmmaker and you 100% own what it is that you're releasing. It's very, very small if you are doing this as a part of a studio deal. Theaters are often skeptical of true indies without a distributor behind them. It's just kind of a fact of life. So here's who I think theatrical releases are best for. One being filmmakers that are aiming for like a festival to theatrical experience, prestige, people that are chasing awards or are trying to impress future financiers, people that already have followings, people that are being championed by others already versus trying to build their career from scratch. Especially vanity projects that have money behind them. That's not me trying to throw shade, but some of the best films out there are, I would think Coda's like a really good example of, they had money behind them, and that gave them a good theatrical run on top of having a great movie, and that led into awards. The flip side of this is Cam B, which is a digital first release. The pros and cons, on the pro side, you have more control. You get to choose the platform, the marketing, the timing, if the film is good, and you can cross all the T's and dot all the I's for the legalities of ending up on a streaming platform. There are lower upfront costs with better long-tail earning potential via AVOD, SVOD, and TVOD distribution. It's easier global reach. You don't have to worry about trying to get your film into global theaters. You can stream in 50 countries simultaneously while you're sipping coffee. It's not a lot of work involved after it goes live, except maybe running ads to these platforms and data. Like, you get data from these. You get insights into who's watching and how, which is super valuable for your next project. There are the downsides, though. It's pretty hard to stand out on a streaming platform. You're one of thousands of films released online. on any given day, you're fighting for the top spot. And if you have a bad debut, then the algorithm is going to bury you. There's less prestige. You don't get the red carpet. You don't get local press. There's no fancy laurels. It still requires a serious marketing effort, or you're kind of just whispering into the void. And reviewers may skip it entirely unless you really hustle to keep them on top of it. So it's probably best for true indie filmmakers that are focused on building their career, not just necessarily the moment of a film. If it is your first project, you're pretty much guaranteed that you're going to have to go direct to streaming. You may get a festival appearance or two, but it's probably not going to be a breakout. At least the odds are against you. It happens, but the odds are against you. And if you're a micro-budget project, you're a niche genre film, or somebody who wants full ownership of your release strategy, then this is kind of the thing for you. And to me, that means that Cam B, that direct-to-digital, is probably the better option, especially from a sustainability perspective. Unless you've got a distributor, you are an award season play, or you have like really rich parents, or have a title of executive producer. The digital first path is kind of the only pragmatic path for you. To me, Cam A to do a theater release is super tempting, but digital release gives you an opportunity to build something, specifically your audience, and your audience is your power in this business. All right, that's Cam A or Cam B. Let's do this is truly my favorite thing, real or real.
Is it a Hollywood classic or complete nonsense created by AI? It's time to play Real or Real.
Real or real. So Real or Real is a game where we ask ChatGPT to come up with 4 kooky, weird movie titles and descriptions. We put them against existing weird and kooky movie titles and descriptions, and you and I try to guess which one is made up. You ready for this? First combo. We have Conspiracy versus Attack of the Killer Tomatoes. Conspiracy. A small farming town uncovers a terrifying secret. Their cornfield is alive and it's hungry for revenge. Attack of the Killer Tomatoes. Tomatoes become sentient and launch a worldwide attack on humanity. I'll tell you what, Attack of the Killer Tomatoes just sounds like a legit kids film to me. So I'm going to guess that that's the real one. But let's check here. It is. Attack of the Killer Tomatoes, 1978 horror sci-fi, 1 hour, 27 minutes, starring Costa Dillon, Stephen Pierce, David Miller, and Sharon Taylor. Wow. 4.6 out of 10 stars on IMDb. I don't know if I'm putting either one of those on my watch list or make list. Hanukkiller is the next movie on here. Hanukkiller, a supernatural dreidel spins out of control, summoning an ancient spirit that targets those who fail to observe the holiday properly. Oh, ChatGPT put together a side-by-side that is a religion battle. So Hanukkiller versus Santa Jaws. A teenage Christmas wish accidentally brings a shark wearing a Santa hat to life, and it begins terrorizing this town. As much as an evil dreidel sounds tempting to me, I'm going to guess that Santa Jaws is real, because I feel like I've just seen out in the world sharks wearing Santa hats. It is 2018 film Santa Jaws. Horror action, 1 hour, 28 minutes. Trying to survive his family Christmas, Cody makes a wish to be alone, which ends up backfiring when a shark manifests and kills his entire family. This is why we love film. Starring Reed Miller, Courtney Lauren Cummings, Haviland Stillwell, and Jim Clock. 4 out of 10 stars. Oh, sorry, 2 out of 5 stars, 4 out of 10 on IMDb. Okay. So I am 2 for 2. Oh no, I know this one. All right, we'll see if you don't. Okay. So which one of these was made by AI? Sharknado, a tornado filled with sharks devastates Los Angeles, versus Quakenado, an Quakenado, an earthquake in Japan releases a swarm of airborne killer squid that descend upon unsuspecting citizens. Any takers? I'm sorry, I know this one. I normally don't know these, but I have been undersmarted by ChatGPT. The real one is Sharknado. A tornado filled with sharks devastates LA. Okay, last matchup of today's Real or Real is Werewhale versus Ghost Shark. There's like a lot of sharks going on in film lately. Okay. Werewhale, a marine biologist cursed by an ancient artifact, transforms into a massive killer whale every full moon. They know killer whales are smaller than... Okay, whatever. Ghost Shark, a murdered shark returns as a vengeful ghost, attacking people anywhere there's water, including bathtubs and puddles. I don't know if I could see a shark coming out of a puddle. I'm going to guess that Ghost Shark was AI written. No, it's real. Ghost Shark, 2013 horror sci-fi, 1 hour, 27 minutes, starring Sloane Coe, Mackenzie Rossman, Robert Aberdeen, and Richard Mall. Wow. Sometimes I worry that like there have been so many movies that I could put another one of these in and it will be Werewhale. Werewhale has a Wikipedia page on fandom. Well, I guess that's the state of the world that we're living in. Thank you for joining me for Real or Real on the Garvescope Show. Let's keep moving along and let's take on the hot take.
Some takes are cold, some are bold, and some are just wrong. This is Taking on the Hot Take.
I'm sorry for the people on TikTok. You don't get the stings and you don't get the sweet music that goes with the stings. You just have to watch me dance in silence. Taking on the hot take. The film industry loves a good trend. AI-generated films, TikTok storytelling, micro-budget horror, and every few years something changes everything. But does it really? Today we're taking on the hot take. You don't have to be an influencer to sell your film, but if you're not Tarantino, A24, or Neon, you'd better be somebody's For You page sweetheart. Becoming an influencer isn't selling out, it's just directing yourself as the lead character in your own marketing campaign. Here's the question for you. Do you have to be an influencer to be successful as an independent filmmaker in 2025? Here's my hot take on this hot take. It's mostly true. People don't just buy films anymore, they buy filmmakers. So if you look at how we treat directors like auteurs, Christopher Nolan, Ava DuVernay, Greta Gerwig, we follow them and not just the work. I think it's, Jordan Peele. A rising filmmaker with an audience becomes the product, and that's not a bad thing. It's kind of leverage for you as a filmmaker. And behind the scenes content is content. You document the journey, you document the process, you look at the failures and how you overcome them. You let the audience fall in love with the making of, and then they'll show up for your premiere. The algorithm really rewards consistency more so than masterpieces. You don't need a $10,000 trailer. Just have, a compelling behind the scenes short that you shot on your phone, and that could make or break your marketing for your independent film. There are so many real world examples. Bo Burnham built a comedy and music empire. Then he dropped 8th Grade and Inside. Just a straight up full blown auteur. The Daniels embraced absurdism online long before Everything Everywhere All at Once won an Oscar. Laura Loom or Aquafina went viral as a YouTube rapper and then turned The Farewell into a great film, proving that personality can actually carry into prestige. So let's talk a little bit, because when you talk about social media and success on social media and becoming an influencer, you need to also acknowledge the risk of burnout, that not every filmmaker is built to be a personal brand. There's danger in turning your life into a never-ending marketing campaign, and that not everyone wants to dance on TikTok, and that's okay. If you can't find your niche, it might be that you just don't have one, and then you have to build yourself up and your career up through other methods. But I do think social media influence is a shorter path right now, for the time being, until everyone's an influencer. Then nobody is. Time spent influencing is not time spent writing, editing, and shooting, so you can't let it distract from the things that you also want to do. So if you're going to embrace the influencer mindset without selling your soul, I would say focus on storytelling instead of selfies. Share your vision and your pain and your absurd coffee shop experiences and writing rituals. But, be genuine. Show the process and not the polish. There's just a fact that, like, behind the scenes content that you would have loved to see when you were first starting out is something that somebody else would want to see now. And that can help you. Now let's get litigious with lights, camera, lawsuit. I don't have a fun sting for this one, so we're just going to jump into it. Every great movie needs conflict. And in Hollywood, some of the most intense battles don't happen on the screen. They happen in the courtroom. Welcome to Lights, Camera, Lawsuit, where we break down the most insane legal fights in the film industry and uncover the lessons every filmmaker should take away. From copyright wars to contract disputes, the stakes are high and the drama is real, and someone's always getting sued. Let's dig in. This time we're talking about the OG Hollywood accounting smackdown. So, in the 1980s, I'm not going to say comedian, a humorist and screenwriter named Art Buchwald pitched a treatment to Paramount that really closely resembled the 1988 movie from Eddie Murphy, Coming to America. Buchwald sued, claiming that the studio stole his idea and that he was owed back-end profits. Paramount responded by saying that the movie didn't make any money, despite grossing $288 million. The court sided with Buchwald, exposing kind of a shady world that is Hollywood accounting, which is effectively hiding film profits so that you don't have to pay people money who negotiated originally to have a back-end cut on any money that's made by the film. This is kind of the perfect example for us to talk about, because it's really where the term Hollywood accounting came from in pop culture, specifically the negative connotation. It became really the case that film students reference when they talk about back-end deals gone wrong. Paramount ended up settling out of court after their financial shenanigans were laid bare to the public. Here's why you should care as a filmmaker. You need to be extremely careful about profit participation deals, especially deals that use net profit, not gross profit. You need to register your treatments and scripts so that they are protected, and you need to have contracts before you pitch to large distributors, and that should be built into their process. But be careful and protect yourself. The case is the very reason why modern writers need an entertainment lawyer, and I recommend that you get one. All right, let's close this out with the last segment of the day. Also one of my favorites, because they're all my favorite. They're like my children. I have 100 of them. I'm not Elon Musk. Following Stephen Follows.
The data's in. The numbers don't lie. We're following Stephen Follows.
So, Stephen Follows, if you do not know of him, does really cool data-driven deep dives into topics around the film industry. He published one this week that I fell in instant love with. It's on the back of the success of the Minecraft movie. He asks, are movies based on video games still the worst? Now, still is a key word there. He did an analysis a couple of years ago, 6 years ago, that found that movies based on video games had the lowest average ratings from both critics and audiences of all script sources. What he wanted to do was look at how these numbers have changed 6 years later, especially after this release of the Minecraft movie. And it's fascinating. But before we dig too deeply into it, I do want to say thank you to Stephen Follows for allowing me preemptively to share this. Everyone should go subscribe to StephenFollows.com. What he does is incredible. There's something for people to learn in every single story that he publishes, and you can tell how hard he works on these. So share that love because he definitely earned it. Now, the answer is video game movies are still the worst. He doesn't bury the lead. He does say, like, I know you're going to have problems with this. This is a mathematical calculation, not a hot take. The numbers reflect subjective taste-based opinions, but the numbers are the numbers. And at the end of the day, it doesn't matter if you like a movie and you enjoy it, then you enjoy it. I call that the uncle rule. Like, everybody has that uncle that will just watch anything that's entertaining because shit blows up. So yeah, take it with a grain of salt. This doesn't dictate what you're going to like, but it does analyze how these things perform in general. So, how many are we talking about? So 52 movies where box office data is available, released over time. This chart is a little bit misleading. This is what percentage of box office came from films that were based on video game IP. And so, like, 1994, large amount of the box office, almost 1%. But that doesn't necessarily mean that that's when the most video game films came out. So he lists out what are the top grossing. So Super Mario Brothers movie from 2023 did $1.4 billion. Sonic the Hedgehog 3 last year, $491 million. So you have a couple of $100+ million box offices. This is a chart of how many were released, or what percentage of theatrical box office was films based on video game IP. So you can see, like, the chart is going up largely on average. With 2002, more than 10% of the films that were in box office were based on video game IP. But let's talk about how bad they are. So, average Metascore. So a combination of critic reviews gave video game movies the worst score, averaging below 40% out of 100. And that's significantly lower than things based on religious text, things that are remakes, things based on toys, with, like, number one being all the way over here, films that were based on real life events, averaging scores above 65 out of 100. Now, if you look at it from an IMDb, like a user rating standpoint, it's the same thing. They're ranked below religious text, ranked below legends and toys, and still, averaging just under 7 out of 10 stars or 7 out of 10 points is real films based on real life events. This is an aggregation, right? It's cool when you map it out into a chart. So in this chart, the further right you go, the higher the average critic score is, and the further up you go, the higher the average crowd score is. So the video games, if you're colorblind, I'm sorry, these are all brown for you, but the video game IP-based movies, you can see, really do lean left, and things that are music and opera lean over and right, with all releases kind of mapped out. So you can see kind of it compared to something else that is IP based, and that is like musical and opera films. So He also went into what is let's see here. So he gathered over 10,000 audience reviews from major platforms and looked at the low scores, 5 or less, and mapped out what people are saying was most wrong with the video game based films. And it's kind of what you would expect: plot, character development, boring, acting and casting, commerciality over quality. And things fall off after that. They're like lacking offensive elements, lacking a lack of, doesn't have genre confusion, not complaining about cinematography, not complaining about it being cheap looking, but really that like what they do with the story is generally what the problem is. He did another cloud that looks at why these things keep ending up this way. And generally can kind of see it being driven into 2 categories, that video game films are very brand driven. And that kind of puts them in this lower tier of brand driven films based on review versus execution dependent, which is more of, if you're going to do a musical or an operatic film, the level of execution that you have to do to bring in the dancers and the music and edit it all together is more complex. So the one other thing that he did that I absolutely loved is he's like, okay, U-Ball, who is notorious for just making the worst films on earth, has made a number of big video game IP based films. And so he wants to say, is U-Ball the reason solely that is he dragging all of these numbers down disproportionately and single-handedly has made films based on video game IP the worst? And the answer is yes, but not drastically. So when he removes U-Ball's films from this cohort, the average score jumps up to 5.6 on IMDb, which means that it just barely passes religious texts. So, bullet notes, U-Ball is the reason video game movies are rated as the worst, but the only thing that he's actually doing is keeping them rated worse than stories that are based on God or religious-based stories. I thought that was fascinating. I thought that was the perfect way to wrap this up. If you have any questions, comments, or concerns, let me know in the question, comments, and concerns section. Thank you so much for watching the Garvescope Show. We will be back again on Tuesday for more movie magic and talk about the business side of the film industry. My name is Ben Garves. Thank you for watching the Garvescope Show. I encourage all filmmakers to go to Garvescope.com and submit your film to our marketplace. It is a free place where your film is surfaced to potential buyers, investors, sponsors, product placers, and hopefully streaming platforms. Go get it. It's free. It takes you 5 minutes to do it. Garvescope.com. Thanks so much for watching, and we will catch you next week.
That's a wrap. See you next time on Garvescope Show. And cut. Print.